The sharp scent of bleach stung my nostrils as I scrubbed the already spotless marble countertop in my mother's kitchen. My shoulders ached from 3 hours of cleaning that morning, but I knew better than to stop. The annual Bianchi gathering was tonight, and everything had to be perfect. Not for celebration, but for survival. I pressed harder against a non-existent stain, my fingers raw and pruned from the water. Outside the kitchen window, November rain drummed against the glass in a steady rhythm that matched the anxious beating of my heart. 23 years old, and I still moved through this house like a ghost, trying to take up as little space as possible. Daisha. My mother's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. I didn't turn around, already knowing the expression I'd find on her face. Disappointment. It was the only look she'd ever given me. Your hair is a mess. Go fix it before the families arrive. And for God's sake, wear something that doesn't make you look so plain. Plain. Forgettable. Invisible. The words she'd used my entire life, each one a small cut that had accumulated into a wound I'd learned to live with. I nodded silently, setting down the sponge with hands that trembled slightly. Not from fear of her anymore, but from exhaustion. Exhaustion from trying, from hoping that maybe this time I'd be enough, from pretending it didn't hurt when I never was. The Griffin family bathroom mirror showed me what my mother saw. Dark circles under green eyes that had once been bright, mousy brown hair that hung limp around a face I'd stopped looking at years ago. Clothes chosen for their ability to help me disappear rather than stand out. I looked tired. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like someone who'd spent 23 years being told she wasn't worth the space she occupied. I pulled my hair back into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup with practiced efficiency, and changed into a simple black dress that my mother had selected. Conservative, appropriate for a Griffin woman attending a Bianchi function. The dress fit the role I'd been assigned since birth. Dutiful daughter, silent observer, convenient piece to be moved around the board of Mafia politics without consultation or care for my own wants. Downstairs, my father had arrived home from whatever business kept him away most days. I heard his deep voice in conversation with my mother, discussing seating arrangements and alliances as though orchestrating a military campaign rather than a dinner party. The Griffins weren't one of the major families, but we were connected enough to matter, positioned enough to be useful. My father served as a financial advisor to several organizations, including the Bianchi family, which meant we lived in their orbit, bound by invisible threads of obligation and fear. I descended the stairs carefully, each step deliberate and quiet. Years of practice had taught me how to move without drawing attention, how to exist in the spaces between notice and dismissal. My younger sister, Amber, passed me without acknowledgement, her designer dress and perfectly styled hair, everything my mother wished I could be. Beautiful, confident, valuable. The Lucianis will be here first, my mother was saying as I entered the living room. Her eyes flickered over me with barely concealed distaste, but she didn't send me back upstairs, which meant I'd achieved the minimum acceptable standard. Make sure you're polite if Kai speaks to you, though God knows why he would. Kai Lucian. The name alone made my stomach clench with an old, familiar dread. Son of Marco Lucian, the current head of the Bianchi family's enforcement division, and heir to one of the most feared positions in the organization. We'd known each other since we were teenagers, thrown together at family gatherings like this one, and every interaction had been a fresh nightmare. He'd been 17 when I was 15, already tall and intimidating with those cold gray eyes that seemed to see right through people. While other boys his age had still been finding their cruelty, Kai had perfected his. He never hit me, never touched me at all. He didn't have to. His words were surgical, precisely calibrated to find every insecurity and exploit it. Still here, Griffin? I'm surprised your parents don't keep you hidden away. Less embarrassing that way. Do you actually think anyone wants you at these things? You're here because your father's useful, not because you matter. That dress makes you look like you're trying to disappear. Smart choice. Works better than whatever personality you think you have. 8 years had passed since the worst of it, since the last gathering where he'd systematically destroyed what little confidence I'd managed to build. I was 15. He was 17. And he'd been particularly vicious that night, drunk on whatever had happened earlier with his father. I'd locked myself in a bathroom and cried for 2 hours. And when I'd finally emerged, my mother had slapped me for making a scene and ruining her evening. I hadn't spoken to Kai since. He'd left for university shortly after, then moved deeper into the family business, earning a reputation that made his teenage cruelty seem almost quaint by comparison. Stories circulated about his ruthlessness, his sarcasm that could flay a man alive, his complete lack of sentiment when it came to business or relationships. Women in the families whispered about him with a mixture of desire and fear, drawn to his power but repelled by his coldness. The doorbell rang, pulling me from the spiral of memories I'd been falling into. My mother smoothed her dress and pasted on the smile she reserved for important guests. My father straightened his tie, transforming into the affable financial advisor rather than the distant, disappointed father. I stood against the far wall, already invisible, already preparing to endure another evening of being reminded why I should be grateful for being allowed to exist in these spaces at all. The first guests arrived in a flurry of expensive perfume and designer suits. I recognized most of them. Mid-level Bianchi associates and their families. People who moved in our orbit without quite touching us. I smiled politely when smiled at, answered questions with the appropriate responses, and slowly felt myself shrinking into the familiar numbness that got me through these events. An hour into the evening, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned toward the entrance, and I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees despite the roaring fireplace. Marco Lucian had arrived. He was a mountain of a man, 60s but still powerful, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes like chips of ice. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went. Ruthless, brilliant, and absolutely terrifying. The stories about him ranged from merely cruel to genuinely monstrous, and from the way even my father's confident smile faltered slightly, I knew most of them were probably true. And standing beside him, taller than I remembered, was Kai. 8 years had changed him. The teenage boy who'd tormented me had transformed into a man who commanded attention without trying. He stood at least 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark brown hair was styled back from a face that had sharpened into something almost beautiful in its coldness. Strong jaw, straight nose, those same steel-gray eyes that I'd seen in nightmares. But it was his expression that truly unsettled me. Bored, detached, as though this gathering, these people, everything around him was beneath his notice. His father leaned close, said something in Italian that made Kai's mouth tighten almost imperceptibly. And then Marco was moving into the room, accepting greetings and accolades like a king among subjects. Kai's eyes swept the room with practiced disinterest, cataloging faces, assessing threats and weaknesses the way I imagined a predator might evaluate prey. They passed over me without pause, without recognition, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment, though why I would want to be noticed by Kai Lucian was a question I didn't want to examine too closely. I edged toward the kitchen, seeking refuge in the familiar task of ensuring drinks stayed filled and appetizers circulated. The catering staff my mother had hired was professional and efficient, but they appreciated the extra hands, especially hands that knew how to stay invisible. I fell into the rhythm of service, grateful for something to do with my nervous energy. Scotch, neat, bye. The voice came from directly behind me, low and controlled, with just a hint of that Italian accent that marked the old families. I turned, tray balanced on one hand, and found myself looking up into Kai Lucian's face. This close, I could see details I'd missed from across the room. The faint scar along his jawline, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, the way his perfectly controlled expression didn't quite reach those cold gray eyes. He didn't look at me. Not really. His gaze was focused somewhere past my shoulder, and I wondered if he even registered that I was a person, rather than just a convenient source of alcohol. "Of course," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. I prepared his drink with shaking hands, grateful for the years of practice that let me perform the task on autopilot while my mind raced. Did he recognize me? Had he even bothered to remember the girl he'd tormented years ago? Or was I so forgettable that 8 years and a different dress were enough to erase me from his memory entirely? I held out the glass, careful not to let our fingers touch, and he took it without acknowledgement. Not a thank you, not a glance, not even a flicker of recognition. He simply took his drink and walked away, leaving me standing there with a tray full of glasses and a chest full of feelings I couldn't name. Relief, certainly. If he didn't remember me, I was safe from whatever new cruelty he might have perfected over the years. But underneath the relief was something darker, something that tasted like all the years of being invisible, of not mattering enough to even be remembered by the person who'd hurt me most. The evening wore on. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a lavish affair of multiple courses and expensive wine that my mother had stressed over for weeks. I wasn't seated at the main table, of course. The Griffin's importance only stretched so far. I was relegated to a smaller table near the kitchen with other peripheral family members, close enough to hear the important conversations, but far enough to be reminded of our place in the hierarchy. From my seat, I could see the main table clearly. Marco Lucian held court at the head, with my father and several other senior associates arranged around him in careful order of importance. Kai sat at his father's right hand, picking at his food with disinterest, while Marco spoke in his booming voice about territories and percentages and other business I'd learned not to ask about. What struck me most was the dynamic between father and son. Marco would lean close, say something in that low, dangerous voice, and Kai's jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly. His knuckles would go white around his fork before he'd carefully relax them. His expression would go even more carefully blank. And throughout it all, he never looked at his father, never made eye contact, never responded beyond the barest nod. I recognized that body language. I'd perfected it myself over years of enduring my mother's criticisms. The way you made yourself smaller, harder to hit. The way you removed yourself mentally, even while your body remained at the table. The way you survived by becoming nothing, no one, just an empty shell that could absorb whatever was being thrown at it. For just a moment, I saw past the cruel teenager who'd tormented me, past the cold underboss everyone feared, and glimpsed something else. Someone else. Someone who maybe understood what it was like to spend your life as a target for someone else's anger. Then Marco's hand came down hard on Kai's shoulder, a gesture that might have looked affectionate to anyone not watching closely. But I saw the way Kai flinched, just barely, before that iron control snapped back into place. Saw the way his fingers tightened around his wine glass hard enough that I thought it might shatter. Saw the muscle in his jaw tick, as Marco laughed at something, his grip still tight on Kai's shoulder. Our eyes met across the room for just a second. Recognition flared in his gaze, immediate and unmistakable, followed by something that might have been surprise. Then his expression shuttered completely, going even blanker than before, and he looked away as though I didn't exist. So he did remember me, the girl he'd tormented, and his response to seeing me again after 8 years was to pretend I wasn't worth acknowledging. The familiar ache settled in my chest, the one that had lived there so long it felt like part of me now. Of course he remembered and chose to ignore me. Of course I wasn't even worth a cruel comment anymore. I'd graduated from target to non-entity, which should have felt like progress, but somehow hurt more. I excused myself from my table, mumbling something about checking on dessert, and escaped to the kitchen where the catering staff was plating tiramisu with practiced efficiency. I leaned against the counter, pressing my palms flat against the cool marble, and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. This was why I'd spent years dreaming of escape, of getting out of this world, away from these people, somewhere I could exist without constantly being reminded of how little I mattered. But escape required money, resources, a plan. Things I didn't have. Things my position in the Griffin family would never allow me to accumulate on my own. "You're the Griffin girl, Daisha." Not a question. A statement delivered in that controlled, emotionless voice I'd just heard across the dining room. I turned to find Kai standing in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame blocking my only exit. He'd abandoned his suit jacket somewhere, his white dress shirt rolled up to his elbows, in a way that shouldn't have been attractive, but somehow was. In his hand, his empty Scotch glass. "I need a refill," he said, holding out the glass. "Everyone out there is useless." The caterers had conveniently disappeared, probably sensing the danger of being caught between whatever this was. I took the glass with hands that weren't quite steady, and moved to the bar cart my parents kept stocked for these occasions. He followed, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I poured his scotch with as much precision as I could manage, hyper-aware of his presence just feet away. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. When I held out the glass, he took it, and this time our fingers brushed. The contact lasted less than a second, but it felt electric, wrong, like touching a live wire. "You've been staring at me all evening," he said, taking a slow sip of his drink. His gray eyes fixed on me with that same predatory focus I'd seen when he evaluated the room earlier. "Why?" My mouth went dry. I didn't mean to." "Don't lie to me, Daisha." My name in his mouth, after 8 years of silence, felt like a violation. "You've been watching me since I arrived. Do you think I don't notice these things?" Heat flooded my face, shame mixing with anger at being called out. "I was just surprised to see you," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a long time. 8 years, 3 months. He said it with such precision that my eyes snapped to his in surprise. A cold smile curved his lips, not reaching his eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't remember? The girl who used to cry every time I spoke to her, who locked herself in bathrooms to escape me, who looked at me like I was a monster." The words hit like physical blows, each one perfectly aimed. My throat tightened, tears threatening, but I forced them back through sheer will. I wouldn't cry in front of him again, wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted, but at least it didn't shake. He stepped closer, crowding into my space in a way that made my back press against the counter. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His eyes searched my face with an intensity that felt invasive, like he was cataloging every flaw, every weakness. "Because I want you to understand something," he said quietly, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "I'm not that angry kid anymore. I've evolved. So has my cruelty." He paused, letting that sink in. "Stay away from me, Daisha Griffin. Don't watch me. Don't think about me. Don't exist in my peripheral vision. Because if you do, if you become something I have to notice, I will destroy you so completely that those bathroom crying sessions will seem like mercy." He set his empty glass on the counter beside me and walked away, leaving me shaking against the marble, tears finally spilling down my cheeks that I furiously wiped away before anyone could see. This was what I'd feared, what I'd known would happen if our paths crossed again. Kai Lucian hadn't changed. He'd just gotten better at finding the places that hurt most. And somehow, impossibly, I would have to find a way to survive in his orbit. The days following the gathering passed in a gray blur of routine and avoidance. I threw myself into my usual tasks, helping my mother with household management, running errands that kept me out of the house as much as possible, and working my part-time job at a small bookstore in a neighborhood far enough from Griffin territory that I could pretend to be someone else for a few hours. The bookstore was my sanctuary. Mr. Chen, the elderly owner, asked nothing of me except that I show up on time and help customers find what they needed. He didn't care about my family connections or lack thereof. He paid me cash under the table, a small amount that I'd been carefully hoarding for years in an account my parents didn't know about. My escape fund, currently sitting at just over $3,000 after 5 years of saving every spare penny. Not nearly enough to actually escape, but it was something. A promise I'd made to myself that someday I'd have enough to leave, to start over somewhere the Griffin name meant nothing. I was shelving new arrivals on a quiet Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family dinner tonight, 6 p.m. Marco and Kai Lucian will be joining us. Wear something appropriate. My hands went numb, and I nearly dropped the book I was holding. The Lucians at our house. For what my mother was calling a family dinner, but was undoubtedly something else. Something worse. In Mafia families, private dinners meant serious business. Alliances being formed. Arrangements being made. Pieces being moved on the board. Mr. Chen noticed my distress from behind the counter. "Everything okay, Daisha?" "Family obligation tonight," I managed, setting the book carefully on the shelf before my trembling hands could damage it. "I should probably head home early to help prepare." He nodded with the understanding of someone who'd lived through his own complicated family dynamics. "Go. I can handle the rest of the day." "But Daisha," he called as I gathered my things, "remember that you always have choices. Maybe not good ones, maybe not easy ones, but choices nonetheless." His words stayed with me during the bus ride home, during the rushed shower where I tried to wash away the dread creeping through my system, during the careful process of making myself presentable according to my mother's exacting standards. I chose a dark green dress that was modest, but not quite as shapeless as my usual selections. Not because I wanted to look nice for our guests, but because I'd learned that if my mother found too much fault with my appearance, she'd take her stress out on me all evening. Better to meet her minimum standards and fade into the background. My mother was in full perfectionist mode when I came downstairs, directing the caterers she'd hired with sharp gestures and sharper words. The dining table was set for 6, my parents, my sister Amber, Marco and Kai, and presumably me. Though I noticed my place setting was slightly smaller than the others, the chair less comfortable. Small reminders of hierarchy even within our own home. "The Lucians will be here in 20 minutes, my mother announced, her critical gaze sweeping over me. "You'll sit quietly. Speak only if directly addressed. And for God's sake, try not to look so terrified. It's embarrassing." My father emerged from his study, already deep in his pre-meeting ritual of reviewing notes and adjusting his expensive watch. He glanced at me with the same vague disappointment I'd seen my entire life, then focused on my sister. "Amber, you'll be seated next to young Kai," he said, and my sister's face lit up with the kind of excitement that made my stomach turn. "Be charming. The Lucians are very important to our family's continued prosperity." Understanding crashed over me like cold water. This dinner wasn't about business deals or territory agreements. This was about marriage, about positioning Amber as a potential match for Kai Lucian, securing the Griffin family's place in the Bianchi hierarchy through the oldest currency, a daughter traded for status. Relief and guilt warred in my chest. Relief that I wasn't the one being offered up. Guilt that I felt relieved while my sister, oblivious to what she was walking into, practically glowed with excitement at the prospect of catching Kai's attention. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. Marco Lucian filled our entryway with his presence, all power and barely contained violence wrapped in an expensive suit. His cold eyes swept our home with the assessment of someone cataloging assets and weaknesses. Behind him, Kai looked even more imposing than he had at the gathering, somehow both present and detached. His expression, that same careful blankness I'd seen when his father gripped his shoulder. "Lucian, welcome," my father said with the hearty false warmth he reserved for important guests. "Thank you for honoring our home with your presence." "Griffin." Marco's voice carried the weight of someone who knew exactly how much power he held in this dynamic. "Your invitation was most interesting. I'm curious to hear what you have in mind." My mother ushered everyone toward the dining room while I hung back, trying to be invisible as servers brought out the first course. I slipped into my assigned seat between my mother and an empty chair, across from where Kai would sit next to Amber. He entered last, his gray eyes scanning the table with that predatory assessment, before landing on me for just a second. Something flickered in his expression, too quick for me to identify, before his attention moved to Amber, to the careful seating arrangement, to my father's barely concealed eagerness. Understanding settled over his features like frost. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his fingers curling into a fist before he forced them to relax. When he took his seat across from me, his movements were precise, controlled, giving nothing away. But I'd seen that moment of recognition, of understanding what this dinner actually was. And I'd seen something else too, something that looked almost like resignation. Like this was one more indignity he'd learned to endure in a lifetime of enduring them. The first course was served, some elaborate soup that probably cost more than I made in a week. Conversation flowed around me in careful patterns. My father discussing business with Marco, my mother making subtle comments about family values and strong alliances, Amber laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny, while trying to catch Kai's attention. Kai, for his part, was masterful at appearing engaged while giving nothing away. He responded to my father's questions with precise economical answers, acknowledged my mother's comments with polite nods, and somehow managed to avoid directly engaging with Amber, despite her increasingly obvious attempts at flirtation. His eyes kept drifting to me, though. Brief glances that I felt like physical touches. Assessing, calculating, trying to figure out what game I was playing by being here, by sitting across from him while my family tried to auction off my sister. "Wonderful to see young people finding their way in our world," Marco was saying, his voice carrying that dangerous undertone that made even my father's smile falter slightly. Kai has been rather resistant to the idea of settling down. Perhaps he's simply been waiting for the right match. My father leaned forward eagerly. Amber is a remarkable young woman. Beautiful, educated, raised with proper values. She understands the importance of family, of loyalty, of supporting her husband's position in the organization. I wanted to disappear. Wanted to be anywhere but sitting at this table watching my father sell my sister like livestock, while my mother nodded approvingly and Amber preened under the attention. But I was trapped, forced to witness this transaction disguised as dinner. "Tell me, Kai," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What qualities do you value most in a potential partner?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye at the table turned to Kai, waiting for his response. He set down his wineglass with deliberate care, his expression giving nothing away. "Honestly," he said, his voice flat and cold, "I value someone who knows when to be invisible." The words hit me like a physical blow, his meaning crystal clear even wrapped in the plausible deniability of a general statement. I felt my face heat, my hands clenching in my lap beneath the table. He was doing it again, finding the exact words that would cut deepest, reminding me of my place, of my worthlessness. But then his eyes met mine across the table, and I saw something there that didn't match his cruel words. Something that looked almost like an apology, like he hated what he'd just said as much as I'd hated hearing it. The moment passed so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. Kai's attention turned back to Marco, who was watching his son with an expression I couldn't quite read. Displeasure, calculation, something darker. "Invisibility can be useful," Marco said slowly, his gaze moving between Kai and me with sudden, uncomfortable focus. But sometimes visibility serves a purpose. Daisha, isn't it? His attention fixed on me like a spotlight. You've been very quiet tonight. What do you think about family alliances? About the importance of everyone finding their proper place? My throat went dry. Being directly addressed by Marco Lucian felt like being singled out by a predator. I think, I managed carefully, that people should have a say in their own futures. The words were out before I could stop them, bolder than I'd intended. My mother's sharp intake of breath, my father's warning glare, Amber's confused expression. I registered all of it in my peripheral vision. But I couldn't look away from Marco, who was studying me now with unsettling interest. Should they? His smile was cold. How progressive. And tell me, Daisha, what future would you choose for yourself if you had complete freedom? It was a trap. Every instinct screamed that giving an honest answer would be a mistake. But I was tired of being invisible, of being dismissed, of sitting silently while my life was controlled by people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient piece to be moved at will. Somewhere far from here, I said quietly. Somewhere I could be myself without being reminded every day how inadequate I am. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother looked horrified. My father's face had gone red with rage he was barely containing. Amber looked between me and our parents with dawning realization that I'd just committed some unforgivable social sin. But it was Kai's expression that caught me. For just a moment, that careful blankness cracked, revealing something underneath. Something that looked like understanding, like recognition, like seeing someone else who'd spent their life being told they weren't enough. Then Marco laughed, a booming sound that made everyone at the table relax slightly. Honest. I appreciate that. So rare in our world. He turned to my father, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Griffin, you've been hiding an interesting daughter. Perhaps we should discuss more. Flexible arrangements. My father looked confused. I'm not sure I understand, Lucian. Oh, I think you do. Marco's gaze moved between Amber and me with calculated interest. Kai, what do you think? Which Griffin daughter would make a more suitable match? The question hung in the air like a blade ready to drop. Kai's expression had gone completely blank again, but I saw his knuckles go white where they gripped the table edge. Saw the muscle in his jaw tick. Saw him trying to control whatever reaction was threatening to break through his carefully maintained composure. This dinner is over, Kai said suddenly, standing with enough force that his chair scraped against the floor. Marco, we need to leave, now. Sit down. Marco's voice dropped to that dangerous register that brooked no argument. We're not finished. I said we're leaving. Kai's voice matched his father's for coldness, and for just a moment, I saw the two men locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Kai turned and walked out without another word, leaving behind a table full of shocked faces and an atmosphere so tense I could barely breathe. Marco stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled in contrast to his son's abrupt exit. Thank you for dinner, Griffin. We'll be in touch about those arrangements we discussed. The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Then he was gone, following his son out into the night, leaving our family in stunned silence. My father erupted the moment the door closed. What the hell was that, Daisha? Do you have any idea what you've done? But I barely heard him. I was still trying to process what had just happened. Kai walking out. Marco's unsettling interest in me. The implication that somehow, impossibly, I'd become a factor in whatever twisted arrangement our families were negotiating. And beneath all of that, one thought kept circling. Kai Lucian had just defended me in the only way he knew how, by refusing to participate in whatever my father had been trying to orchestrate. The question was why. The 3 days following the disastrous dinner passed in suffocating silence. My mother refused to speak to me except to deliver cutting remarks about ruining opportunities and being ungrateful. My father sequestered himself in his office, emerging only for terse phone conversations conducted in Italian that I wasn't meant to understand. Amber had started looking at me with something between resentment and confusion, as though she couldn't quite figure out what had happened but knew somehow I was to blame. I went to work at the bookstore, grateful for Mr. Chen's unspoken policy of not asking questions. I shelved books with mechanical precision, helped customers find their next read, and tried not to think about gray eyes and the way Kai had looked at me across that dinner table. Like he'd seen something. Like maybe, impossibly, he'd understood. It was Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. I was reorganizing the classics section, alphabetizing Dickens and Dostoevsky, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Daisha Griffin? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yes? Please hold for Mr. Lucian. My heart stopped. Not Marco. It couldn't be Marco. He wouldn't. Daisha. Kai's voice, that controlled monotone I'd come to recognize as his default setting. We need to talk. Can you meet me in 20 minutes? I'm working. I know where you work. I'm outside. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what just happened. Kai was here, outside the bookstore, waiting for me. Mr. Chen appeared at the end of the aisle, his lined face concerned. Everything all right? I need to step out for a few minutes, I heard myself say, though my voice sounded distant, disconnected. Is that okay? He studied me for a long moment. Take as long as you need. But Daisha, remember what I said. You always have choices. The November afternoon was cold when I stepped outside, the kind of damp chill that seeped through clothes and settled in bones. A black Mercedes was parked across the street, its tinted windows hiding whoever waited inside. As I approached, the back door opened. Kai sat in the far corner of the seat, his tailored suit making the expensive interior look almost ordinary, his gray eyes fixed on me with that intensity I'd come to associate with him cataloging threats. But today, beneath the calculation, I saw something else. Exhaustion, maybe. Or resignation. Get in. Not a request. I climbed into the car, and the door closed behind me with a solid thunk that sounded too much like a trap springing shut. The driver, hidden behind a privacy screen, pulled into traffic without a word. Where are we going? I managed, pressing myself against the opposite door, as far from Kai as the back seat would allow. Somewhere we can talk without being overheard. He produced 2 phones from his jacket pocket, holding one out to me. Give me yours. Why? Because everything you say on that phone is monitored by your father. Everything I say on mine is monitored by Marco. If we're going to have an honest conversation, we need to do it without an audience. The casual way he revealed surveillance in both our lives shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. You're monitored by your own father? Something bitter flashed across his face. You have no idea what it's like in the Lucian household, and you should be grateful for that ignorance. I handed over my phone and took the one he offered. It was a simple prepaid device, nothing like my smartphone. When he was satisfied both our regular phones were secured in what looked like a signal-blocking case, Kai finally seemed to relax fractionally. What is this about? I asked, needing to fill the heavy silence. The dinner 3 nights ago. He was watching me with that unnerving focus. Do you understand what your father was actually proposing? He was trying to arrange a marriage between you and Amber. Initially, yes. But Marco picked up on something your father apparently missed, and now we have a problem. Dread pooled in my stomach. What kind of problem? Kai ran a hand through his dark hair, disrupting its perfect styling for the first time since I'd met him. The gesture made him look younger, more human, more like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Marco thinks you're interesting, unusual. He finds your honesty refreshing, which is possibly the most dangerous thing I've ever heard him say about someone. Kai's eyes met mine. He's decided that you would make a better match for me than your sister. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and the dread turned to ice in my veins. No, that's not... I didn't do anything to... I know. His voice was firm. You were being yourself. Unfortunately, in Marco's twisted logic, that makes you valuable. Interesting enough to possess. I'm not a possession. To men like Marco, everyone is a possession. Something to be acquired, controlled, or eliminated. He leaned forward slightly, his intensity pinning me in place. Daisha, listen to me carefully. Marco is planning to approach your father about a formal arrangement, an engagement, between you and me. The air left my lungs. I won't. I'll refuse. I'll tell them. You'll tell them what? That you won't do your duty to your family? That you're too good to marry into the Lucian line? His voice was harsh, but not with the cruelty I expected, with something that sounded like urgency. Do you understand what happens when women from our families refuse beneficial arrangements? I didn't want to know, but his expression told me I needed to understand. What happens? They become liabilities, problems to be managed, and Marco's favorite way of managing problems is to eliminate them. The casual way he said it, like discussing the weather, made it somehow more terrifying. He would kill me for refusing to marry you? Probably not. Too much risk of blowback from the other families. Kai's jaw tightened. He'd more likely arrange an accident for someone you care about, a message about the cost of defiance, your bookstore owner perhaps, or a cousin you're close to, someone peripheral enough that their death would look unconnected to you, but strategic enough to break your resistance. Mr. Chen's kind face flashed through my mind. The way he'd given me a job when no one else would, asked no questions about my family connections, paid me cash so I could slowly build my escape fund. The thought of him being hurt because of me made bile rise in my throat. Why are you telling me this? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. If you're trying to terrify me into compliance, congratulations. It's working. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're walking into. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, held it without offering it to me yet. And because I'm going to give you something no one in my position should give someone in yours. What? A choice. He extended the envelope. Inside is a passport, $10,000 in cash, and contact information for someone who can help you disappear. Leave tonight. Get on a bus, a train, a plane. Go somewhere Marco's influence doesn't reach. Change your name. Start over. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why would you help me escape? Because. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face before he buried it. Because 8 years ago, I was a kid who'd just had the shit kicked out of him by his father for some minor infraction. I walked into your family gathering looking for someone weaker to take it out on. I found you. Sweet, shy Daisha Griffin, who flinched when people raised their voices. And I destroyed you systematically because hurting you made me feel powerful for 5 minutes. The admission hung between us, raw and ugly. I've spent the last 8 years becoming very good at being Marco's son, Kai continued, his voice flat. At being cruel enough that no one looks too closely at whether I'm faking it or not. At pushing away anyone who might become a weakness I can't afford. But that night at dinner, seeing you again, hearing the way your father talked about you, about Amber, like you were livestock to be traded. It reminded me that I used to be better than this. That there was a time, before Marco broke me down and rebuilt me in his image, when I didn't enjoy causing pain. I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to take this money and run. He thrust the envelope at me. Because in about 48 hours, Marco is going to formally propose the arrangement to your father. Your father, who sees an opportunity to elevate the Griffin family's status, will accept, and then you and I will be engaged whether we want it or not. Can't you just refuse? Tell him no? Kai's laugh was bitter. You really don't understand how this works, do you? I'm Marco's heir, his legacy, his weapon. I don't get to say no. I get to smile and obey and pretend I'm grateful for whatever he decides is best. He looked away, his jaw working. But I can save one person from being dragged into this hell, so take the money, Daisha. Disappear before Marco's announcement makes that impossible. I took the envelope with numb fingers, feeling its weight. $10,000. A passport. Freedom. Everything I'd been saving for, working toward, dreaming about for years, being handed to me by the last person I'd ever expected to offer help. If I run, Marco will retaliate against my family, against you for helping me. Your family will be fine, disappointed, but fine. Marco will find another useful arrangement for the Griffins. Kai's voice went even colder. As for me, I'll handle Marco's displeasure. I've had plenty of practice. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, made me realize something I should have seen before. The careful blankness of his expression, the way he flinched when Marco touched him, the exhaustion in his eyes. This wasn't about being cruel or maintaining a reputation. This was about survival. Kai Lucian was being abused by his father, had been, probably for years, and he'd learned to cope by becoming the monster Marco wanted, by burying whoever he'd been before so deep that maybe he didn't exist anymore. I can't, I heard myself say, the words surprising me as much as they clearly surprised him. If I run, you'll be alone in this. And after what you just told me, after you're trying to give me a way out, I can't do that to you. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. But I recognize what I see in your eyes, Kai. I see it in my own mirror every morning. We're both prisoners. The only difference is, you've convinced yourself you deserve it. His face went absolutely still, his mask slipping for just a second to reveal something raw underneath. Pain. Recognition. The look of someone who'd just been seen for the first time in years. Don't. The word came out rough. Don't try to save me, Daisha. I'm too far gone for that. Just save yourself. What if we saved each other instead? The question hung between us, impossible and terrifying, and somehow the only thing that made sense. If we were both being forced into this arrangement anyway, maybe there was a way to make it bearable. Maybe two broken people could find a way to survive together. You have no idea what you're suggesting, but his voice had lost some of its harsh edge. Then explain it to me. Help me understand what I'm walking into. Kai was quiet for a long moment, warring with himself. Then, slowly, he began to talk. And what he told me over the next hour, as the Mercedes drove aimlessly through the city, painted a picture of a life I'd never fully understood. He told me about growing up as Marco's son, about the impossible standards and brutal punishments for any perceived weakness, about learning to hurt people before they could hurt him, about cultivating a reputation for cruelty so extreme that even other made men gave him a wide berth, about the women Marco had paraded through his life, beautiful, ambitious women from connected families who saw Kai as a prize to be won, and never looked deep enough to see the person being slowly crushed under the weight of his father's expectations. He told me about the drinking, the reckless decisions, the way he'd perfected the art of being simultaneously visible and invisible. Present enough that Marco couldn't accuse him of hiding, invisible enough that he didn't draw too much scrutiny. And he told me about the fear, not of Marco's fists, though those had taught plenty of lessons over the years, but of becoming Marco, of looking in the mirror one day and seeing his father looking back, having completed the transformation from victim to victimizer. That's why I pushed you away so viciously at the last gathering, Kai said finally, his voice raw. When Marco told me I needed to start seriously considering marriage, start building connections that would solidify my position, you were the only person in that room who looked at me like I was human. And that terrified me. Because caring about someone, letting someone matter, that's the fastest way to watch Marco destroy them, just to teach me a lesson about attachment. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the cruel boy who'd tormented me years ago, with the cold underboss everyone feared. Is that why you were so cruel to me when we were younger? Because you saw weakness in yourself reflected in me? Probably. He met my eyes. I'm not proud of it, Daisha. I was a scared kid taking out my fear on someone even more scared. It doesn't excuse what I did, but it's the truth. The car had circled back toward the bookstore without us noticing. Now we sat parked across the street, the envelope of escape money heavy on my lap, impossible decisions weighing heavier. If I stay, if I agree to this arrangement, what happens? I asked quietly. We get engaged. Publicly. Properly. With all the ceremony that Marco will insist on. You move into the Lucian compound for appearances. We play the role of devoted couple for the families. Kai's voice went flat again, retreating behind that mask. And we endure. Together but separately. Because getting close to each other, caring about each other, that's what Marco will use to control us both. That sounds like hell. It is, but it's a hell I already know. A hell I'm equipped to survive. He gestured to the envelope. You still have a way out, Daisha. I'm giving you one more chance to take it. Run. Tonight. Don't look back. I looked down at the envelope, at the promise of freedom it represented. Everything I'd wanted for years was right here in my hands. All I had to do was take it and go. But I thought about Kai's eyes when he'd told me about Marco's abuse, about the way his hands had trembled slightly when he described trying not to become his father, about the fact that he'd offered me an escape route, even though it would cost him dearly. And I thought about myself, about spending my whole life running from difficult things, about being invisible, about letting fear dictate every choice, about the girl who locked herself in bathrooms rather than standing up to someone cruel. Maybe it was time to stop running. I'm staying, I said, before I could change my mind. I accept the arrangement. Kai's eyes widened fractionally, the most emotion I'd seen from him yet. Daisha, I'm not doing it to save you, I interrupted. I'm doing it because you're offering me something no one else ever has. Honesty. You told me exactly what this would be. No pretty lies about love or happiness. And you're giving me more freedom than I've ever had, even if it comes with strings attached. At least this way, I know what prison I'm choosing. This is insane. Probably. I held out my hand. But we're in this together now, partners in survival, if nothing else. He stared at my extended hand for a long moment, clearly struggling with whether to accept this, whether to let me walk into his nightmare voluntarily. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not crushing. And in that moment, shaking hands with Kai Lucian in the back of a Mercedes, I felt something shift. Not love, not trust, but something that might become the foundation for both. Understanding. And in our world, that was rarer than either. Marco will announce it tomorrow night, Kai said, still holding my hand. At the monthly family meeting. Your father will be there, and he'll accept on your behalf. What should I do? Tonight, pack everything you care about. Not because you're running, he added quickly when I tensed, but because you're moving. Tomorrow, after the announcement, I'll send people to collect your things from your parents' house. You won't be going back there except for occasional supervised visits. The finality of it should have scared me more. Maybe I was in shock, or maybe I'd finally reached the limit of how much fear one person could feel before it all just became background noise. One rule, Kai said suddenly, his voice intense. We don't fall in love. We don't get attached. We're allies, not lovers. We protect each other, support each other. But we keep our hearts separate. Because the moment Marco sees real emotion between us, he'll use it to destroy us both. I can agree to that. After all, love required vulnerability I'd never felt safe offering anyone. Maybe keeping emotional distance would actually make this easier. Then we have a deal. He released my hand and pulled out the signal blocking case, returning our regular phones. Go home, pack, act normal. And Daisha? Yes? His gray eyes met mine, something unreadable in their depths. Thank you for choosing hell voluntarily. Most people wouldn't be that stupid. Thank you for offering me a way out, even though you knew it would cost you. I opened the car door, pausing before I stepped out. We're going to survive this, Kai. Both of us, together. I hope you're right. But for the first time since I'd met him again as an adult, his smile reached his eyes. Just barely. Just for a second. But it was there. Because if you're wrong, this is going to be the worst mistake either of us ever made. I left him there in the Mercedes, walked back into the bookstore where Mr. Chen was waiting with concerned eyes and unspoken questions. And I wondered if Kai was right. If I'd just made a terrible mistake. If choosing to walk into a cage, even one I understood, was the same as choosing freedom at all. But as I worked through the rest of my shift, mechanically shelving books and helping customers, one thought kept circling. For the first time in my life, I'd made a choice. Not because I was told to, not because I was afraid not to, but because I'd looked at my options and selected the one that felt the most like taking control of my own story. Even if that story was about to become a mafia fairy tale with no guarantee of a happy ending. That night, I packed everything that mattered into 2 duffel bags, photos, books, the small collection of journals I'd kept since I was 13, my laptop with its half-finished novel, the emergency money I'd saved, which seemed laughable now compared to what Kai had offered me. My mother found me around midnight, standing in my doorway with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "So you're really doing this," she said. Not a question. Apparently. Marco Lucien's son. Most girls would consider that an honor. I looked at her, this woman who'd spent 23 years telling me I wasn't enough, wasn't right, wasn't wanted. Do you, Mother? Do you consider it an honor that your daughter is being traded for status? Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I consider it an opportunity for you to finally be useful to this family. Try not to waste it. She left without another word, and I finished packing alone. Tomorrow my life would change irrevocably. I would become Kai Lucian's fiancé, bound to a man I barely knew, entering a world I didn't understand. Everything I'd known, everything I'd wanted would end, but I would be making that choice myself. And somehow, that made all the difference. The announcement came exactly as Kai had predicted. My father returned from the monthly family meeting with barely contained excitement, practically vibrating with the social elevation he'd just secured. I was in my nearly empty room, the duffel bags packed and waiting by the door, when he burst in without knocking. "It's done," he said. And for the first time in my life, he looked at me like I mattered. Not because of who I was, but because of who I was about to become. "Marco Lucien has formally proposed an engagement between you and Kai. I've accepted on behalf of our family. Congratulations, Daisha. You're going to be a Lucian." I nodded, keeping my face carefully neutral. "When?" "Kai's people will be here in an hour to collect you and your belongings. The engagement will be announced publicly tomorrow at the Bianchi Charity Gala. Marco wants to make it a spectacle." My father's eyes gleamed with an ambition I'd seen directed at my sister, but never at me. Don't embarrass us, Daisha. This is the most important thing you'll ever do for this family. After he left, I sat on my stripped bed and let the reality sink in. In 1 hour, I would leave this house forever. Leave behind the girl who'd spent 23 years trying to be small enough not to bother anyone, quiet enough not to be noticed. That girl had served her purpose. Now I needed to become someone else. Someone who could survive as Kai Lucian's fiancée. The black Mercedes arrived precisely 60 minutes later, but this time Kai wasn't inside. Instead, a woman emerged, mid-30s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that cataloged everything about me in seconds. Daisha Griffin? Her voice was professional, crisp. I'm Sophia Marino, Mr. Lucian's personal assistant. I'll be helping you transition into your new living arrangements. She directed 2 men to collect my bags while she escorted me to the car. My mother watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Amber stood beside her, confusion and jealousy warring on her pretty face. My father had already retreated to his study, having secured his prize and moved on to other business. No one said goodbye. No one hugged me or wished me well or asked if I was okay. They simply watched as I climbed into the car that would take me away from the only life I'd ever known, and I felt nothing but relief. The Lucian compound is about 30 minutes from here, Sophia said as we pulled away. You'll have your own suite in the east wing, bedroom, bathroom, sitting area. Mr. Lucian's quarters are in the west wing. You'll share common areas for appearances, but you'll each have privacy when needed. Has Kai told you about our arrangement? I asked carefully. Mr. Lucian tells me everything necessary for me to do my job effectively. Her voice softened slightly. Which includes understanding that this engagement is strategic rather than romantic. I'll help you navigate that complexity. The compound was even more imposing than I'd imagined. High walls topped with security cameras surrounded at least 2 acres of manicured grounds. The main house was a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion that screamed old money and older power. Armed guards were stationed at regular intervals, their presence so normalized that Sophia didn't even acknowledge them. Marco lives in the main house, she explained as we pulled up to a smaller building. Though calling it small was relative. It was still larger than the home I'd just left. Kai insisted on separate quarters when he turned 25. This is his residence, and now yours. Inside, the space was surprisingly normal. Expensive, certainly, with that casual wealth that came from never having to think about cost. But it wasn't ostentatious. Clean lines, comfortable furniture, books on shelves that looked actually read rather than decorative. A home rather than a showpiece. Your suite is upstairs, second door on the right, Sophia said. I've had some essentials delivered. Clothes, toiletries. If you need anything else, just let me know. Mr. Lucian will be home around 6. He'd like you to join him for dinner if you're comfortable with that. And if I'm not comfortable, she smiled slightly, then I'll have dinner sent to your room, and Mr. Lucian will eat alone. But between you and me, he's trying. That's more than most men in his position would do. After she left, I explored my new space. The suite was beautiful, decorated in soft grays and blues, with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable, and windows that overlooked the gardens. The closet held clothes in my size. Designer labels I recognized from magazines but had never imagined wearing. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Kai had been planning this longer than just our conversation yesterday. I found him in the kitchen at 6, standing at the stove with his shirt sleeves rolled up, actually cooking. The domestic image was so at odds with everything I knew about him that I stopped in the doorway, uncertain. I didn't know you could cook, I said. He glanced over his shoulder, something almost like amusement in his gray eyes. Marco thinks cooking is beneath a Lucian, which made me determined to learn. He gestured to the table, already set for 2. I hope you like pasta. It's one of the few things I make decently. We ate in surprisingly comfortable silence. The pasta was good, Really good, and I found myself relaxing slightly as Kai made no demands, asked no uncomfortable questions, just let me eat and adjust to this strange new reality. "Tomorrow is going to be difficult," he said finally, pouring wine for both of us. "The announcement at the gala. Everyone will be watching, judging, trying to figure out what angle Marco's playing by having me engaged to a griffin instead of someone from a more prominent family. What should I do? And stay close to me. Let me field the questions. Smile when appropriate, but don't feel like you need to perform." His eyes met mine with unexpected intensity. "And Daisha, remember that we're partners in this. Anything they say about you, they're saying about me too. We protect each other." The gala the next evening was exactly the ordeal Kai had warned me about. Sophia had helped me prepare, hair styled in an elegant updo, makeup that made my green eyes dramatic, a dress that probably cost more than my car. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Kai wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his height and build. He looked every inch the powerful underboss everyone expected. But when his eyes met mine, I saw nervousness underneath the control. We were both performing tonight, both pretending to be stronger than we felt. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "No, but let's go anyway." The ballroom was packed with everyone who mattered in the city's underworld. I recognized faces from family gatherings over the years. The Russos, the Castellanos, the Bianchis. All of them turning to watch as Kai and I entered, his hand possessive on my lower back, my smile fixed in place. Marco held court near the center of the room, surrounded by lieutenants and advisors. When he saw us, his expression shifted into something calculating and satisfied. He'd orchestrated this, gotten exactly what he wanted, and now he was going to parade his victory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marco's voice boomed over the crowd, silencing conversations. "I have an announcement that brings great joy to the Lucian family. My son Kai has chosen his bride. Many of you know Daisha Griffin, a woman of intelligence, discretion, and proper values. The engagement will be formal, the wedding to follow in 6 months. I expect all of you to join us in celebrating this union." Applause erupted, but underneath it I heard the whispers. "Griffin? Why a griffin? What's Marco's angle? She's nobody. What does Kai see in her?" Kai's hand tightened on my waist, a silent reminder that we were in this together. I lifted my chin, met the curious stares with as much composure as I could manage, and let Kai guide me through the crowd of well-wishers who didn't actually wish us well at all. "Kai," a woman's voice, sultry and familiar to him, if not to me. I turned to see a stunning brunette in a dress that left little to imagination. "Is it true? You're really getting married?" "Camilla." Kai's voice went cold in a way I'd come to recognize as defensive. "Yes, it's true. Daisha, this is Camilla Russo. Camilla, my fiancée." The way he said fiancé, with absolute possession, sent an unexpected shiver through me. Camilla's eyes narrowed as she assessed me, clearly finding me lacking compared to whatever she'd expected. "How unexpected," she said, her smile sharp. "I had no idea you two were even seeing each other." "We prefer to keep our private life private," I heard myself say, surprising both Kai and myself with the steadiness of my voice. "But when you know, you know." It was a lie, of course. But it was the lie we needed to sell, and I watched Kai's expression shift into something almost like pride as he pulled me closer. The rest of the evening blurred together. Congratulations that felt like interrogations, smiles that didn't reach eyes, questions about our relationship that Kai deflected with practiced ease. And through it all, Marco watching us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. We didn't speak on the ride home. Kai looked exhausted, his mask slipping now that we were alone. I felt drained too, the weight of performing for hours pressing down on me. "You did well tonight," he said as we entered his Our residence. Better than I expected. I learned from the best. When he looked confused, I clarified. You. Watching you perform tonight, seeing how you navigate these people, it helped me understand what was expected. Something shifted in his expression. I don't want you to become like me, Daisha. Don't lose yourself trying to fit into this world. Then what do you want from me? He was quiet for a long moment, the first real silence since we'd met again. I want you to survive this with your soul intact. Because if both of us become monsters, what's the point? He left me standing in the entryway, retreating to his wing without another word, and I climbed the stairs to my suite, changed out of the designer dress, and sat on my bed trying to process everything. I'd survived the announcement, survived the scrutiny, but the real test was just beginning. Living here, with Kai, in this strange limbo between enemies and allies, learning to trust someone who'd once been my tormentor, becoming someone strong enough to stand beside him without being crushed by the weight of his world. I pulled out my journal, the one I'd kept since I was 13, and began to write. Not about the gala, or the announcement, or the performance, but about the boy I'd once known who'd hurt me, and the man he'd become who was trying not to hurt anyone anymore. Maybe we could survive this. Maybe two broken people really could find a way forward together. Or maybe we'd destroy each other trying. Only time would tell. Living with Kai was nothing like I'd imagined. We orbited each other carefully those first weeks, like planets maintaining safe distances. He left for work early, meetings and business I wasn't privy to, while I explored my new reality with Sophia's guidance. You need to understand the social structure, Sophia explained over coffee in what had become our morning routine. The wives and fiancés of made men have their own hierarchy. Charity work, social events, maintaining appearances. You'll be expected to participate. What if I don't want to? Then you make Kai look weak, and that's dangerous for both of you. So I attended luncheons with women who smiled too brightly and asked invasive questions disguised as friendly concern. I volunteered at the Bianchi Foundation's Youth Center, teaching reading to kids from families on the periphery of the organization. I learned which families were allies, which were rivals, which were watching for any sign of weakness to exploit. And through it all, I felt myself changing. Not becoming someone else, but uncovering parts of myself I'd kept hidden. The girl who'd locked herself in bathrooms was still there, but she was learning to lock doors from the outside instead. Learning that sometimes survival meant standing your ground rather than running. Kai noticed. I caught him watching me sometimes, during the dinners we shared most evenings, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not the cold assessment I'd expected, but something closer to curiosity. Like he was trying to figure out who I was beneath the performance we both maintained. It was 3 weeks into our engagement when everything shifted. I'd come downstairs late, unable to sleep, planning to make tea and maybe read for a while. The residence was quiet, just the hum of climate control and distant security patrols. But as I passed Kai's study, I heard something that made me stop. Raised voices, Marco's boom cutting through even closed doors, and then a sound that made my blood run cold, the sharp crack of flesh hitting flesh, followed by something heavy hitting the floor. I should have kept walking, should have pretended I hadn't heard. But my hand was already on the door handle, already pushing it open before rational thought could stop me. Marco stood over Kai, who was on his knees, blood trickling from his split lip. The older man's face was contorted with rage, his fist still raised. You think you can refuse me? Marco's voice was deadly quiet now, which somehow made it worse. You think marrying some nobody griffin gives you the right to question my decisions? I'm not questioning your decisions. Kai's voice was controlled despite his position, despite the blood. I'm asking for clarification on the timeline. The difference matters. The difference is that you do what I say, when I say it, without asking for clarification. Marco's hand shot out, gripping Kai's jaw hard enough to leave marks. Or do I need to remind you what happens when you forget your place? Stop. The word left my mouth before I could stop it, and both men's heads snapped toward me. Kai's eyes widened with something like horror. Marco's narrowed with dangerous interest. Daisha. Kai's voice held a warning. Go back upstairs. I said stop. I stepped fully into the room, my heart hammering but my voice steady. You're hurting him. Marco released Kai's jaw and straightened, his attention now fully on me. Did I hear correctly? You're giving me orders in my son's home? Every instinct screamed at me to apologize, to back down, to run. But I'd spent too many years running from confrontation, and I'd made Kai a promise. We protect each other. I'm stating a fact. I kept my voice level. You're hurting your son, hurting the man I'm engaged to marry. That makes it my business. Kai had managed to stand, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His expression was carefully blank, but I saw the tension in every line of his body, ready to step between Marco and me if necessary. Marco studied me with that unsettling intensity I'd seen at the dinner. Interesting. The little griffin mouse has teeth. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. You think you understand what you're interfering with? I understand that Kai is your son, not your property. And I understand that whatever business disagreement you have, there's no excuse for violence. No excuse. Marco's smile was cold. How naive. In our world, violence is the only language some people understand. It's how respect is earned, how order is maintained. Your fiancé knows this. He's been learning this lesson his entire life. The casual way he admitted to years of abuse made my stomach turn, but I held my ground. Then maybe it's time for the lesson to end. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Marco laughed, a booming sound that made me flinch despite myself. You have spirit, I'll give you that. He turned to Kai. Perhaps you chose better than I thought. A wife who'll stand beside you even when she should run. His expression hardened. But know this, girl. If you interfere in business again, spirit won't save you. Are we clear? Crystal. He left, his presence lingering even after the door closed behind him. I stood frozen, adrenaline making my hands shake now that the confrontation was over. Kai remained where he was, staring at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. You shouldn't have done that, he said finally. Probably not. He could have hurt you. Could have. He stopped, his jaw working. You don't understand what you just risked. I understand that watching someone be abused and doing nothing makes me complicit. I moved closer, pulling a handkerchief from my pocket. Sophia had insisted I always carry one, and held it out. Your lip is bleeding. He took it, but didn't use it, just stared at the fabric like he'd never seen anything like it. Why did you do it, Daisha? Why interfere? Because we're partners, remember? I met his eyes. You protect me. I protect you. That was the deal. Not from Marco. No one protects anyone from Marco. Maybe not before, but I just did. I reached up slowly, giving him time to pull away, and pressed the handkerchief gently to his split lip. And I'll do it again if I have to. His hand came up to cover mine, not removing it but holding it there. His gray eyes searched my face, looking for something. Pity, maybe, or fear, or judgment. Whatever he was looking for, he didn't seem to find it. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said quietly. Probably both. I applied a bit more pressure to stop the bleeding. Sophia says I have a tendency to act without thinking things through. She calls it my tragic flaw. A smile ghosted across his lips, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him immediately followed by a wince. "Don't make me laugh. It hurts." "Sorry." But I was smiling too, this strange moment of connection overshadowing the fear that had preceded it. He released my hand and stepped back, the distance between us returning. But something had changed. Some invisible wall had developed the smallest crack. "You should go back to bed," he said, his voice controlled again. "Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Marco will test you now. See if you're all talk, or if you actually mean what you said." Let him test me. I meant every word. After I left, I climbed the stairs to my suite on legs that felt unsteady. Only when I was safely behind my closed door did I allow myself to shake, to process what I'd just done. I'd confronted Marco Lucian, stood up to one of the most dangerous men in the city, for Kai, for my partner in this impossible arrangement. My phone buzzed, the secure one Kai had given me. A text from a number I didn't recognize but somehow knew was him. "Thank you. No one's ever done that before. Try to sleep. We'll face tomorrow together." I read it 3 times before responding simply, "Always together. That's the deal." His reply was immediate. "Always." That night, I dreamed of gray eyes and split lips, and the way Kai had looked at me like I was something precious instead of convenient. And I wondered if we'd just crossed a line we could never uncross. If standing up for him had been the beginning of breaking the rule we'd both agreed to. Don't fall in love. Don't get attached. Keep our hearts separate. Because my heart didn't feel very separate anymore. It felt like it was starting to recognize his, 2 damaged rhythms trying to find harmony in the chaos of the world we inhabited. And that scared me more than anything Marco could ever do. The retaliation came swiftly. 2 days after I'd confronted Marco, I was summoned to the main house. Not requested, summoned, in the formal language of the organization. Sophia's face was grave as she delivered the message. "Marco wants to see you at 2:00. Alone." Kai, who'd been working in his study, appeared in the doorway so fast he must have been listening. "No, absolutely not." "It wasn't a request, Mr. Lucian." Sophia's voice was gentle but firm. "And refusing will make things worse for both of you." "Then I'm coming with her." Marco specifically said alone. Sophia looked between us. "I think he wants to understand who Daisha really is, without your influence." The conversation that followed, after Sophia left, was the closest thing to a fight Kai and I had ever had. He wanted to protect me, shield me, keep me away from his father's manipulations. I wanted to prove I could handle myself, that I wasn't just hiding behind him. "You don't understand what he's capable of," Kai argued, pacing his study like a caged animal. "The mind games, the way he twists things, he'll find every weakness and exploit it. Then let him find my weaknesses. Better he discovers them now than later when it actually matters." "It matters now." He stopped pacing, his hands clenched at his sides. "It's always mattered. From the moment you agreed to this arrangement, your safety became something I have to protect." "Have to or want to?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He went very still. "Does it make a difference?" "Maybe. Because if you're only protecting me out of obligation, that's one thing. But if you actually care..." I stopped, realizing I was treading into dangerous territory. The territory of feelings we'd agreed to avoid. "If I actually care, it makes you a liability." His voice was rough. "It gives Marco exactly what he needs to control me. Don't you see that, Daisha? The more I care about you, the more danger you're in. Then we're already in danger, because I care about you too." The admission hung between us, impossible to take back. "I care that he hurts you. I care that you've spent your whole life being controlled and manipulated. I care that you're trying so hard to protect me even though it costs you. So if caring makes us liabilities, we've been liabilities since the night I walked into your study and saw what Marco does to you. Kai closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, something had shifted in his expression. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. If he threatens you, if he even implies violence, you tell me immediately. Promise me, Daisha. I promise. At 2:00 precisely, I walked to the main house alone. The guards let me pass without comment, but I felt their eyes following me. Everyone knew about my confrontation with Marco. Everyone was waiting to see what happened next. Marco's office was on the 2nd floor, a massive space designed to intimidate. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books in Italian that I suspected he'd never read. He sat behind his desk like a king on a throne and gestured to the chair across from him without preamble. Sit. I sat, keeping my spine straight, hands folded in my lap. Everything about my posture said I wouldn't be cowed, even though my heart was racing. You've been living with my son for a month now, Marco said, his cold eyes assessing me. Tell me, Daisha Griffin, what have you learned about the Lucian family in that time? That you value loyalty above all else. That you've built an empire through careful control and strategic violence. That you see people as assets to be managed, rather than individuals to be respected. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Honest. Refreshingly so. Most people try to placate me with flattery. Flattery would be a waste of both our time. Indeed. He leaned back in his chair. Do you know why I chose you for Kai instead of your sister? Instead of one of the connected daughters who've been throwing themselves at him for years? Because you think I'm controllable. Easier to manipulate because I've spent my life being invisible. Partially. His smile was cold. But also because I saw something in you that night at dinner. When you spoke about wanting freedom, about being somewhere you weren't reminded of your inadequacy. I recognized that hunger. I've seen it in Kai his entire life. This desperate need to be somewhere else, someone else. My chest tightened. What's your point? My point is that you're more alike than different, you and my son. Both of you shaped by parents who saw you as disappointments. Both of you learning to survive by being whatever was expected. Both of you dreaming of escape while being too practical to actually run. He was right. And I hated that he was right. If you're trying to make me feel connected to you, I'm trying to make you understand something. He leaned forward, his intensity pinning me in place. Kai will never be free of me. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. He can play at protecting you, at being partners, at building something separate from my influence. But in the end, he's my son, my weapon, my legacy. And nothing, not love, not loyalty, not even you, will change that. You're wrong. The words escaped before I could think better of them. Marco's expression darkened. Excuse me? You're wrong about Kai. Yes, you shaped him. Yes, you've controlled him through fear and violence his entire life. But that doesn't mean you own who he fundamentally is. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. There's still something good in him, something you haven't managed to destroy. And as long as that exists, he'll never be fully yours. And you think you can nurture that goodness? Save him from his destiny? I think we can save each other. Not from you necessarily, but from becoming the people you both want us to be. Marco was quiet for a long moment, studying me with unsettling focus. Then he stood and moved to the window, looking out over the compound. I could destroy you with a word, Daisha. Send you back to your family in disgrace. Or worse, make you disappear entirely. No one would question it. That's the power I hold. I know. Yet you sit there defending my son, challenging me. Either you're incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Or maybe I'm just tired of being afraid. I stood, keeping my voice level despite the fear coursing through me. You wanted to test me, understand who I really am. This is who I am. Someone who stands up for the people she cares about, even when it's dangerous. Someone who won't be controlled by fear anymore, no matter how much power you think you have over me. He turned from the window, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not quite respect, but close to it. You'll do, he said finally. You'll do nicely for what I have planned. The cryptic statement sent a chill through me. What do you mean? You'll find out soon enough. For now, you're dismissed. Tell my son that his fiancée has more spine than I expected. That should please him. I left, before he could change his mind, before my bravado could crack and show him how terrified I actually was. But I made it back to Kai's residence without breaking, without letting anyone see the fear. Kai was waiting in the entryway, pacing, his face going from worry to relief when he saw me. What did he say? Are you okay? Did he? I walked straight into his arms, needing the contact, the reassurance that I'd survived. He went rigid for just a second. Then his arms came around me, holding me with surprising gentleness. I'm okay, I murmured against his chest. I stood up to him. Again. And I survived. Of course you did. His voice was rough with emotion he was trying to contain. You're stronger than either of us realized. We stood like that for a long moment, his arms around me, my face pressed to his chest where I could hear his heartbeat. It was the closest we'd ever been, the most vulnerable either of us had allowed ourselves to be. Kai, I said quietly. What did Marco mean when he said I'd do nicely for what he has planned? His arms tightened fractionally. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That night, we broke our unspoken rule about maintaining separate spaces. Not romantically, but out of necessity. We sat in his study, drinking wine neither of us really tasted, and talked. Really talked, for the first time since we'd become engaged. He told me about his mother, who'd died when he was 10, a gentle woman who'd tried to shield him from Marco's worst impulses and paid for it with her life. The official story was an accident, but Kai had always suspected otherwise. I told him about my childhood, about watching Amber receive all the love and attention I'd craved, about learning that the best way to survive was to need nothing from anyone. And somewhere in that conversation, with wine and honesty loosening our careful guards, we both admitted the truth we'd been avoiding. We were falling for each other. Had been since that first honest conversation in the Mercedes, maybe even before. And falling for each other in Marco's world was the most dangerous thing we could possibly do. We should stop this, Kai said, but he didn't move away from where we sat, close enough that our shoulders touched. Before it's too late. I think it's already too late. I looked at him, at the man who'd tried to push me away for my own protection, who'd offered me escape, who'd somehow become the person I cared about most. I think we passed too late the moment I agreed to stay. This is going to end badly, Daisha. Marco will use it against us. He'll find a way to weaponize what we feel. Then let him try. We'll figure it out together. You keep saying that. Together. Like it's that simple. Isn't it? We're partners. We care about each other. We're going to survive whatever Marco throws at us. That seems pretty simple to me. His laugh was bitter. You make it sound possible. Like we actually have a chance. We do have a chance. As long as we don't give up on each other. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, and I saw the war happening behind his eyes. The part that wanted to believe warring with the part that had learned not to hope for anything good. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. How to care about someone without destroying them. Marco taught me to see relationships as transactions, emotions as weaknesses. I don't know how to unlearn that. Then we'll learn together. We'll figure out what caring looks like in our world, with our history. It won't look like normal relationships, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something that works for us. And if we can't, then at least we tried. At least we refused to let Marco's poison define us. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and traced my jawline with gentle fingers. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sexuality and everything to do with trust. "You terrify me," he whispered. "The way you make me hope. The way you make me believe things could be different." "Good. You terrify me too. But that's not going to make me stop caring about you." He leaned in slowly, his forehead resting against mine, and we stayed like that. Not kissing, not speaking, just breathing the same air and letting the moment settle between us. Whatever Marco had planned, whatever tests and manipulations lay ahead, we would face them together. Two broken people trying to build something whole from their damaged pieces. It wasn't a love story, not in the traditional sense, but it was our story, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The call came at 3 a.m. I was dead asleep when my phone, the secure one, buzzed insistently. Kai's name on the screen sent immediate adrenaline through my system. "Daisha." His voice was controlled, but I heard the undercurrent of urgency. "Don't panic, but I need you to listen carefully." I sat up, fully awake now. "What's wrong?" "Marco knows. About us. About the fact that we've gotten close, that we actually care about each other. Someone's been watching us, reporting back to him." He paused. "He's planning something, and it's going to happen soon. Within days." "What kind of something?" "I don't know yet. But Sophia's been asking questions, trying to piece it together. All we know is that it involves you directly, and that Marco considers it a test." His voice dropped. "A test we can't afford to fail. What do you need me to do?" "Tomorrow morning, I need you to meet someone." Her name is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Organized Crime Division. She approached me 3 months ago with an offer: immunity and witness protection in exchange for testimony against Marco. My breath caught. "You're working with the FBI?" "Not officially. Not yet. But I've been keeping the door open, gathering information just in case." He sounded exhausted. "Daisha, if whatever Marco's planning puts you in direct danger, we might need to use that escape route. Chen can get both of us out, set us up somewhere far from here. But that means leaving everything. Our families, this life, each other potentially, if we go into separate protection." "I know. That's why I haven't taken the deal yet. But if Marco's test involves hurting you to control me, or worse, I need to know that option exists." We talked for another hour. Kai explaining what he'd learned, what he suspected, what terrified him about Marco's silence over the past week. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us both. But before we hung up, he said something that made my chest ache. "Whatever happens, Daisha, I want you to know. You changed everything. Before you, I thought I was destined to become Marco. But you made me believe I could be something different, someone better. Even if this all falls apart, thank you for that. It's not going to fall apart. We're going to survive this. You don't know that." "No, but I believe it anyway." The meeting with Agent Chen happened at a deliberately public location. A busy cafe where surveillance would be obvious. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that assessed me thoroughly before she spoke. "Kai says you can be trusted," she began without preamble. "That you're an ally, not just a strategic marriage." "We're partners," I confirmed. "Partners in organized crime?" Her tone was neutral. but I heard the judgment underneath. Partners in survival. There's a difference. She slid a folder across the table. Everything we have on Marco Lucian. 20 years of investigation. Evidence that should have put him away a dozen times. Witnesses who mysteriously disappeared before they could testify. He's untouchable through conventional means. But not through Kai's testimony. Kai is Marco's heir, his right hand, privy to information no one else has access to. His testimony, combined with the evidence we've already gathered, could bring down the entire operation. She leaned forward. But it would require both of you entering WITSEC. New identities, new lives, complete separation from everything you've known. What if we don't want to run? Then you're either very brave or very stupid. Because based on what Kai's told me, Marco is planning something that will force a choice. And once that choice is made, there's no going back. She was right, though I hated admitting it. Whatever Marco had planned, it was designed to corner us, to force decisions that would define our entire future. I returned to find Kai in his study, documents spread across his desk. Financial records, I realized. Evidence of money laundering, extortion, all meticulously catalogued. You've been gathering this for a while, I observed. 3 years, ever since I realized I was becoming him. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes broke my heart. Every time Marco ordered something that crossed a line, I documented it. Every body, every dollar, every life destroyed. I told myself it was insurance, a way to protect myself if he ever turned on me completely. But really, I think I was hoping for an excuse to bring him down. And now you have one? Me. Don't say it like that. Like you're just an excuse. He stood, crossing to where I hovered in the doorway. You're the reason, Daisha. The reason I finally want to be free more than I want to survive. His hands framed my face with that gentle possession I'd come to crave. Whatever Marco's planning, whatever test he thinks will break us, we face it together. And if we have to run, if we have to take Chen's offer and disappear into protection, we do it together. I'm not letting him separate us. What if he doesn't plan to separate us? What if he plans something worse? The question hung between us, unspoken scenarios playing out in both our minds. Marco was nothing if not creative in his cruelty. Whatever he had planned would be designed to cause maximum damage, maximum pain, maximum control. The answer came 2 days later, delivered not through Marco directly, but through my father. He called me to the Griffin house for what he termed a family discussion. Kai insisted on coming, though he remained in the car while I went inside. My father, mother, and Amber waited in the living room. All of them wearing expressions I'd seen before. The carefully neutral faces that meant something terrible was about to be announced. Daisha, my father began, his voice carrying that false warmth that made my skin crawl. We've been approached with an interesting opportunity. Marco Lucian has requested that you move into the main house, into Marco's residence, for the final 2 months before the wedding. My stomach dropped. Why? To ensure proper preparation for your role as Kai's wife, to learn the Lucian family traditions, expectations, duties. He smiled that cold smile. Marco wants to mentor you personally. The trap became clear immediately. Marco, mentoring me, having daily access to manipulate and control me away from Kai's protection. It was brilliant in its cruelty. He couldn't be accused of separating us since we'd still be on the same compound. But the distance would be enough to drive wedges between us, to poison whatever we were building. And if I refuse? My mother's expression hardened. You don't refuse Marco Lucian, Daisha. You should know that by now. Besides, Amber spoke up, her voice carrying a bitterness I'd never heard before. You've been given everything. the engagement, the status, the life I was supposed to have. The least you can do is fulfill your obligations without complaining. Understanding crashed over me. This was punishment. For standing up to Marco, for caring about Kai, for refusing to play the role of obedient pawn. And there was no way out that wouldn't have devastating consequences. I left without answering, knowing my silence would be interpreted as assent. Kai saw my face when I returned to the car, and immediately knew. What did he do? I explained Marco's request, watched Kai's expression go from concerned to furious, to that deadly calm that meant he was planning something. "We're not doing this," he said finally. "We're taking Chen's deal. Tonight. We gather what we need, turn over all the evidence, and let the FBI handle Marco while we disappear." Kai. No more discussion, Daisha. I won't let him have you. I won't let him use you to control me, or worse. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I'd rather lose everything than watch him break you the way he broke me. Then we don't let him break either of us. We go into that house together. Together? What are you talking about? I move into the main house like Marco wants, but you move with me. Insist on it. Frame it as proper engagement protocol, whatever story sells. We don't give him the separation he's banking on. That's insane. Living under his roof, under his constant surveillance, is better than running and spending our lives wondering if he found us. Better than witness protection, separate identities, losing each other in the process of staying safe. I turned to face him fully. You said we face this together, so let's face it. Let's walk into his house, play his game, and beat him at it. You don't beat Marco at his own games, Daisha. No one does. Then maybe it's time someone tried. The argument continued for hours, but eventually, Kai agreed. Not because he thought it was a good plan, but because the alternative meant definitely losing me to WITSEC protocols that would separate us. At least this way, we had a chance of staying together. Marco's response to Kai's demand to move into the main house was immediate, and surprisingly, agreeable. Too agreeable, which meant he'd anticipated this move. Family should be together, Marco said during the tense meeting where logistics were discussed. Kai can take the West Wing guest quarters. Daisha will have the East Wing. Close enough for propriety, far enough for traditional separation before marriage. Which meant we'd still be separated, just under the same roof, still within his control. Moving day was surreal. My belongings, such as they were transferred to a bedroom that was beautiful and cold. All expensive furniture and no warmth. Kai's quarters were 3 hallways away, close enough that we could theoretically see each other, far enough that Marco would know immediately if we tried. The first week was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Marco inserted himself into every moment of our days. Breakfast meetings where he questioned me about family values, afternoon sessions where he detailed the brutal history of Lucian operations, dinners where he casually mentioned people who'd crossed him and disappeared. And always, he kept Kai and me apart. Different schedules, different obligations, different rooms. We saw each other in passing, brief moments where our eyes would meet across the dining room or in the hallway, but never alone. Never with the privacy to actually talk, to plan, to connect. I felt myself fraying under the constant pressure, felt the isolation eating away at the strength I'd built, and I knew that was exactly what Marco wanted, to break me down until I was malleable, controllable, properly grateful for whatever scraps of autonomy he deigned to grant. It was on the 10th day that everything came to a head. I'd been called to Marco's office, a summons I'd learned not to refuse. He sat behind his massive desk, and for once, he didn't look calculating or cold. He looked tired, almost human. "Do you know why I'm doing this, Daisha?" he asked. "Separating you from Kai, controlling your days, testing your limits. To break me, to make me obedient. No, to protect you." The answer was so unexpected that I actually laughed. Protect me? From what? From my son. He stood, moving to the window overlooking the compound. Kai thinks he's different from me, that he's found some goodness I couldn't destroy. But I know the truth. He's exactly like me. And the moment you become inconvenient, the moment caring about you threatens his position or his safety, he'll do what I taught him to do. He'll eliminate the threat. You're wrong about him. Am I? How many people has Kai hurt on my orders? How many has he killed? Do you actually know what your fiancé is capable of when pushed? I didn't have an answer for that. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I knew the Kai who cooked pasta and opened up about his past. But I'd never seen him in his role as Marco's enforcer. Never witnessed what he was capable of when violence was required. I see the doubt, Marco said softly. Good. Doubt will keep you alive. Blind faith will get you killed. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that in our world, love is a liability, caring is weakness, and the only way to survive is to keep everyone at a distance. He turned from the window. I'm not trying to break you, girl. I'm trying to prepare you for the reality of being a Lucian, for the day when Kai has to choose between you and his survival, and you need to be strong enough to accept his choice. The conversation haunted me through dinner, through the evening, through the long night where I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Was Marco right? Was I being naive, seeing goodness in Kai that didn't actually exist? Or was this just more manipulation? More mind games designed to isolate me further? I didn't have answers. But I knew I needed to see Kai, needed to talk to him without Marco's surveillance, so I did something stupid and desperate. I snuck out of my room at 2 a.m, navigated the dark hallways with my heart in my throat, and picked the lock on Kai's door using skills I'd learned from YouTube videos. He was awake, sitting in the dark by his window, and he didn't seem surprised when I appeared. I was wondering how long it would take you to break protocol, he said quietly. 12 days. Impressive restraint. I closed the door softly behind me. We need to talk about what Marco's been filling your head with, about whether I'm trustworthy, whether I'm really different from him, whether you're safe with me. How did you know? Because it's exactly what I'd do if I wanted to turn someone against an ally. Plant seeds of doubt, exploit fears, make them question everything they think they know. He finally looked at me, and even in the darkness, I could see the exhaustion etched into his features. And the hell of it is, Daisha, I can't even promise he's wrong. I don't know what I'm capable of when pushed. I don't know where Marco ends and I begin anymore. I crossed the room and took his hands, lacing our fingers together. Then we figure it out together. We face whatever darkness might be inside you, whatever fears Marco's cultivating, and we don't let it destroy us. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. I choose to trust you. You choose to be worthy of that trust. We both choose each other over the fear. He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine in that gesture that had become ours. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Daisha. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. If this goes wrong, if Marco wins, if I end up hurting you despite everything, you won't. But if I do, then we'll deal with it when it happens. But I refuse to let fear of what might go wrong stop us from fighting for what could go right. He kissed me then, the first real kiss we'd shared. Not gentle or tentative, but desperate and necessary, and full of everything we'd been holding back. A promise and a plea and a declaration all at once. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he said the words I'd been hoping to hear without realizing it. I love you. I shouldn't. And it's probably going to destroy us both. But I love you, Daisha Griffin. I love you too. And we're going to survive this. We're going to beat Marco's games, and we're going to build something real out of all this brokenness. You can't know that. No, but I believe it anyway. I left before dawn, before Marco's people did their rounds, slipping back into my room like a ghost. And that day, when Marco tested me again with questions and manipulations and psychological warfare, I faced it with renewed strength. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Kai and I had each other, and that made all the difference. The final confrontation came a week later. Marco called us both to his office, together, for the first time since we'd moved into the main house. He looked between us with that calculating expression, and I knew he'd figured something out. Knew that despite his best efforts, we'd found ways to connect, to strengthen rather than fracture. "You've surprised me," he said finally. "Most people break under this kind of pressure, but you two have gotten stronger, more united." He shook his head almost admiringly. "I underestimated what you're building together." "So what now?" Kai's voice was level, controlled. "More tests? More attempts to break us apart?" "No. Now I accept reality." Marco leaned back in his chair. "You care about each other. Real caring, not just strategic alliance. And that means I need to adjust my plans." Dread pooled in my stomach. What does that mean? It means the wedding is moved up. 2 weeks instead of 2 months. It means you both move back to Kai's residence immediately and prepare for your new roles as a married couple in this organization. He smiled that cold smile. "And it means I stop trying to control you through separation and start using your connection to control you both." Understanding crashed over me. By caring about each other, we'd given Marco exactly what he needed. Leverage over Kai that was even more powerful than fear or violence. Me. "The FBI offer is still open," Kai said quietly, his hand finding mine under the table. "We can still run." I looked at him, at this man who'd offered me escape multiple times, who was willing to give up everything to keep me safe. Then I looked at Marco, at the puppet master who thought he'd won. "No," I said clearly. "We're not running. We're getting married. We're building our life here. And yes, you'll use our connection to control us. But eventually, you'll make a mistake. You'll push too far or demand too much. And when you do, we'll be ready." Marco's laugh was genuine. "I almost like you, girl. You've got spine." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. 2 weeks. Plan accordingly. And Kai, take care of her. Because if anything happens to your wife, you'll be the one who suffers for it. We left his office, walked back to Kai's residence in silence, and only when we were safely behind closed doors did we allow ourselves to react. "We just declared war on Marco," Kai said, running his hands through his hair. "You realize that, right? By refusing to be afraid, by staying when we had the chance to run, we've positioned ourselves as a threat." "Good. Let him see us as a threat. Let him worry about what we're capable of together. And if he decides to eliminate the threat, then we use Chen's evidence, turn it all over to the FBI, and let them handle Marco while we figure out what comes next." I took his hands, held them firmly. "But it doesn't have to come to that. We have 2 weeks to prepare, to plan, to shore up our position. And then we're married. Legal family. That gives us protections even Marco has to respect. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or completely insane. Both. Definitely both." He pulled me into his arms, held me like I was the only thing keeping him anchored. 2 weeks until you're my wife. 2 weeks until we can't go back. I don't want to go back. Forward is the only direction that matters. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation, anticipation, and careful maneuvering. Kai and I refined our plans, documented every one of Marco's illegal activities, and built a network of allies who might support us if things went sideways. And finally, on a cold December morning, I walked down the aisle of the same church where the engagement had been announced. This time wearing a dress I'd actually chosen, carrying flowers I actually liked, toward a man I actually loved. Kai waited at the altar looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. When I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, "Last chance to run. Not a chance. You're stuck with me now." The ceremony was traditional, formal, everything Marco had demanded. But when we said our vows, when we promised to love and protect each other for better or worse, we meant every word. Not because we had to, but because we chose to. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Kai kissed me like he was sealing a promise, like he was claiming me and offering himself in return. And when we turned to face the assembled families, we did it together. United. Unbreakable. Marco watched from the front row with an expression I couldn't read. Pride, maybe, or calculation. But underneath it, something else. Respect, possibly. Or fear. Because we'd done the impossible. We'd found love in his world of violence. We'd built trust in his empire of manipulation. We'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. And that made us dangerous. Later that night, alone in our residence as husband and wife, Kai held me close and asked the question I knew he'd been holding. What happens now? Now we live. We build our life together. We wait for Marco to make his move, and when he does, we're ready. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. I looked up at him, at my husband, my partner, my choice. We face his demons together, and we refuse to let them win. Together, always together. And in that moment, with his arms around me and our future uncertain but ours, I knew we'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice or the easy choice, but the right one. We'd chosen love over fear, connection over isolation, each other over everything else. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Two broken people who'd found a way to be whole through each other. Two prisoners who'd found freedom in choosing their cage together, rather than being trapped in separate ones. It wasn't the happy ending fairy tales promised, but it was ours, and that made it perfect.